Miami real estate should be local. If your realtor can't show your real estate in a golf cart, this is probably not the neighborhood they specialize in.
Welcome to Lo que callan los hombres, what men don't tell. I am Carlos Anaya, founder of Cafecito Espiritual. This is a space where we have the conversations many men avoid having. The ones about success and failure, purpose and identity, the pressures we carry, the lessons we learn, and the stories we rarely share. Because behind every achievement, there is a human being. And behind every successful man, there is a story most people never hear. Today's guest is David Hamilton Nichols, an investor, entrepreneur, author, and global speaker who has built a life of impact across business, leadership, and service. He has spoken at Davos, the Nobel Peace Center, universities across the United States and India. He has spoken at Davos or Davos? Davos.
Davos is how they
I'm sorry. He has spoken at Davos, the Nobel Peace Center, universities across the United States and India, and he has worked with leaders and organizations around the world. From the outside, his story looks like success. But today, we're not here to talk about the resume. We're here to talk about the man behind it, the lessons that don't make the headlines, and the struggles that don't appear on LinkedIn, and the questions that success alone cannot answer. David, welcome to What Men Don't Tell. What an honor to have you here.
Thank you, Carlos. A pleasure to be here.
This is not a typical interview for you because when there's no audience, when there's no stage, when there is no business to close, who is David?
A very rare person, because it is very rare that I am not either on a stage or doing a business deal or involved with a company. So that's the trite answer is a very rare person. I would say probably when not on stage, I do have a very spiritual, contemplative side to me that is not going to be obvious in those scenarios.
So what does success mean to you after 25 years? And what does it mean for you today? Because you have accumulated experience and knowledge and seem to be very savvy in what you do.
Well, at 25 years old, I would say success meant a lot about money and a lot about acclaim and being recognized for that. I would say there is, jokingly, I'd say it's more money and more acclaim. But I would say it's also broadened and deepened over the years because, yes, for success, if you want to define it traditionally, it is about the money and the recognition. But there is also more to that. What can you do with that success? What relationships have you built over the years through that success? And how can you use that to make your imprint then on the world to make that world a better place in the image that you want it to be?
We're in a society that is about go-getters and you got to do this and you got to do that. But it's never about giving, and you have kind of measured both. So when did you realize that achievement could not create happiness?
That assumes that one realizes that it can't. But I would say there comes a point where there's a law of diminishing return on it. If you've struggled to make something happen and you've made it happen, there's a certain satisfaction in that achievement. You've conquered, you've triumphed. But after it becomes easier and you do more and more of it, there's maybe a little less satisfaction in it and it becomes more normalized or more commonplace. So I would say there's an element there. I think it was the saying, I think Alexander the Great is quoted as being sad because there were no more worlds to conquer. There are no more lands left to conquer. So at a certain point, that there is that law of diminishing return, and you then realize what else is there to it.
So have you ever experienced some type of loneliness, getting to the top? Because I'm sure there's despair, there's loneliness. I heard that the top gets lonely sometimes.
I would say, well, if you are, anytime you're going to excel at anything as a human being, the amount of hours and the amount of drive and diligence required to make that happen, that's tremendous. So that is taking up a lot of your time and energy. So you are going to be in some ways lonely by default because of the amount of that you are putting into that. But I would say once you are at that point where you're at some degree of a pinnacle, you're going to realize that a lot of people don't understand that journey and also don't understand where you are at. It's also, just like a lot of wealthy people don't understand what that entails. People don't understand what being in the public eye entails. And there's a lot of luster around it. A lot of people are very impressed by it, but do they really understand it? And I don't think a lot of people do. So where is the companionship? It would be with other people that have achieved or have gotten to a pinnacle in their life. You can find those people, and those circles become relatively small. I would say, having traveled globally and been in some very interesting rooms over the years, you start seeing some of the same people, but you run into them on different continents, and you run into them again. So it becomes a somewhat of a community then in itself. I've heard somebody once say about U.S. presidents, they might be friends with each other when they were political enemies because they understand something that very few people on this planet understand. They were president of the United States. So being president of the United States, how many of them are living? A few of them. They're the only ones that are going to understand each other there.
Which leads me to the next question, because people sometimes, because we work on television and in media, people think that we don't have struggles or problems. People think that it's just magic and that nothing happens, and we have challenges. So what has been your darkest?
It's very challenging to create that illusion.
Yes. So what has been your darkest professional moment, and what did it teach you?
I would say that would be a case where in some business I was dealing with someone who was very unethical. They wanted me to come in with them on something that I absolutely would not do. I'm not going to go into real details there due to various privacy things and various parties involved, but they could not understand why I didn't want to do it. They thought something was wrong with me. I'm like, no, something's wrong with you that you can't understand why I don't want to do this. And just having been associated with the person, it makes me, just thinking about it makes you want to unhappy, because I always lead business properly. And of course, I did not end up partaking with the person, but you always have to be very careful who you do business with on some things.
Yeah, and sometimes ego kills everything. I always say that ego kills businesses, friendships, relationships.
Yeah, I would say, example, I can think of times where I've done some business with people. Ego can get in the way.
Yes.
And life's too short. You have fun while you're doing it. I guess I can say this on the air. One of my rules of business is don't be a dick. It's pretty easy, not to be, but for some reason, there are some people out there that have a great deal of trouble with that.
Yes, and when do you realize that you're dealing with purpose and not with ego? When is there like a wake-up call, or is there a sign that you say, let me operate from the place of purpose, not from the place of ego?
I would say you can tell you are operating more from purpose when you are in a flow state. If you are having to fight it all the way, and not that there aren't times you have to fight things in business or that you have to push, but if you're having to do that all the way, that's more likely you are in ego. If you are in a flow state and you are kind of going with that and making it happen and putting the effort in, of course, but if you are more in that flow state, you are more likely to be in purpose.
And now let's be honest. What is it that men don't tell?
What is it that men don't tell? I would say, that it's very easy to put on the illusion that it's easy, but it's not always easy, and it does get easier the more years you put into something. But putting that illusion on while you're getting there, sometimes of making it look easier than it is. And it does get easier with it's like any sport. You put in the reps, you are going to get better and better at it. But I think it's not always acknowledged that often it takes quite a while to get to the point where you're being recognized and you're getting the dividends of the work that you have put in.
You know, I always have an intention when I walk into boardrooms. I am the guy who dresses differently, who appears differently, who looks differently, who acts differently and talks differently. So, you know, there's always a footprint before I get into the boardrooms or any type of business meetings. So what do you think is the men don't tell when it comes to business? What is it that men hide when it comes to business?
Well, I would say sometimes what I've seen from doing business with people, they will try to make themselves sometimes more than they are because if they can get in that room, some people think it's going to magically translate into success. It doesn't. If you don't bring value to the equation, you are not going to stay in those rooms. But I've seen people try to get in there by pretending to be what they're not, and that does not end well.
Yes, and which also leads to my next question. You know, you work with many wealthy people and successful people, which I also kind of have the opportunity to do it. So what is it that you have learned from the wealthy people and the relationship with money and success?
I would say... Well, I would start with that a lot of the world seems to think money buys happiness. It doesn't, but it can buy things that are conducive to happiness. There's a distinction there. I've met a lot of wealthy people that are miserable. I've met a lot of wealthy people that are happy. So that is partly an inside job and what you're choosing to do with that wealth. I think another misconception is that sometimes people might think, well, money buys you love. Well, it buys you the wrong kind of love sometimes. It can buy. You can do a lot of good with that money, but just to assume that it'll buy you love, that's a falsehood, and often it might make you very suspicious of the people who love you as well.
You seem to be a very successful person, which you are, and you are my friend. We have nothing in common, but we have a friendship in common, I will say. And, I also have millionaire female friends, and a lot of men feel intimidated by the success of a woman, especially when she's a billionaire. What do you have to say about that? Men that feel inferior when the woman is powerful, stronger than a man.
Well, I can't say I've seen that personally in a relationship, but from observation, I would say it tends to work well when the man has made more money or has that. The relationships tend to last more. Now,
but why is it so uncomfortable for a man
I think
not to have a woman who's 10 times smarter than or stronger financially?
I think it's uncomfortable for both. I think it's not just the. I think for the man, we have gone societally been expected to be providers, expected to be leaders, historically, and there's still a lot of that expectation. You can argue whether that's right or wrong. I'm just answering your question.
But why do we have that default? Why does it have to be something wrong by default? If it's life circumstances that the person makes more money than the other one.
Well, I would say, I mean, again, I'm fairly traditional in my values. I tend to lean on that and agree with that. But, to answer your question, I think there's the expectation is there that the man is going to be the leader and the provider. And also then the woman, I talked to a gentleman who's a dating coach. I met him socially, and he had been... He mentors a lot of women and a lot of very successful women. And it was still, they wanted the man to still be more successful than they were. So then their options were very limited. And the men that were very successful were more successful than they were often then looking at a younger woman or one who was more, not so driven women and didn't have. So again, I think this is something that's on both sides of the coin. Somewhat of it is societal expectations. Some of it, though, is also we are wired differently. Statistically, for the most part, men have more testosterone. Men have a certain drive, and again, you're going to have outliers. Anything. That's not to judge any one man or any one woman, but I think there's also some biological differences at play here too.
Yeah, and I just think it's also cultural, because I think, why does it has to be a taboo for a woman to make more money than a man? I think it's something that it shouldn't be a taboo. It shouldn't be a conversation on the table. But unfortunately, there is this level of inadequate to judge a person just by the salary, I think, is my own humble opinion. But leading to the question, so when people introduce you as an investor and as a speaker, as a producer and as an author, how do you want your family to remember you? What is it, the legacy that you want to leave behind?
That presupposes I have a family, which I don't. The only really close family I have is my mom, who's still alive. But as far as family, I have to find the right woman to settle down with first.
Okay. But you've spoken at the Nobel Prize, Peace Center at the Davos universities in the United States and also in India. So
Get around.
What accomplishments are you most proud of that people will never appear on your resume?
I would say that I have kept my integrity and my honor throughout that.
Okay. And any regrets?
There's probably, if looking back, the benefit of hindsight is 2020. So I would say if I were to look back, there would probably be some choices or businesses I wouldn't have got involved in. But then again, how would I have necessarily known always at the time?
Okay, at Lo que callan los hombres, what men don't tell, we believe that every man carries a story, and sometimes they rarely share it. So what is something you have never asked in an interview, and but which someone will ask?
Well, I wish you hadn't asked that question, because that's not an easy question. But I would say, jokes aside, where to find joy, because that's something that we aren't. We often don't think about, especially because we are very busy. If we're successful people, we keep very busy. So where to find joy, whether that's in a day, in a year, or whatever. And I think where that probably became most apparent is in 2020 during COVID. I was a delegate at the Independent National Convention in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and I ended up behind. I seen outside there in the parking lot, there's these Texans dragging a guy in the snow there in Cheyenne, Wyoming, like on one of those like sleds, like things, dragging him behind their truck. And I'm like, okay, I got to do it. I'm like, hey, let me do this. And I just noticed at that point, that was probably the most joyous moment I had in the year 2020, was just throwing like that caution of the wind and getting dragged in the parking lot in a sled by a couple Texans in their truck. And realizing that there is an important time to take that moment, and what are you doing in a given day or a given year to find enjoyment as well.
And I've seen you dancing. You dance very well. I mean, and I see you having a good time.
Who says white men can't dance?
I know. So, what is it that you take in this multicultural landscape that you are surrounded with? Because you have friends from everywhere. So, what do you take out of the multiculturalism that we experience in the United States today?
Well, I would say not as. I would say more. I have more friends, and I noticed this first when I was in California. More of because I lived originally in California. I live now here in Florida. But when I was there, I had more business connections outside California than I did in. And I noticed that a lot of my friends are, in other countries. So I would say having a broad set of experience and a broad set of business contacts lends towards seeing opportunity before other people will. It lends itself towards being able to have conversations on topics that maybe somebody who's had a more insular set of experiences would not be able to. So I think having knowledge is power, and wisdom is how we use that. So having that experience to draw on is very useful in looking at businesses, looking at partnerships, and just being able to see where opportunity lies.
You know, David, you are one of the most interesting people that I like to that I enjoy talking to. That I love your presence. We always exchange ideas, and we're always
Funny
connected.
you say that on the most interesting me. I will add an anecdote. Somebody was trying to do some branding for me some years back, and he was saying, "Yeah, we ought to do you as the most interesting man." And I'm like, "No, I think Dos Equis already did that."
David Hamilton Nichols, thank you for being here today on Lo que callan los hombres. An honor to have you, and may you continue the success of what you do and to open doors for other entrepreneurs to find purpose and also a vision and a mission to go. So it was such a pleasure to have you here.
A pleasure, Carlos.
And again, this is not just a podcast. This is just real conversations of real men. So we see you next time en Lo que callan los hombres.